Welcome to the Hawke's Bay Regional Council Extraordinary Meeting, 13th of November. Welcome to councillors, to members, staff and our manuhiri, our guests today, which we will hear from in our open forum. To start us off, let's open with our karakia. Please join in. Whakataka te hau ki te uru, whakataka te hau ki te tonga. Kia mā kine ki uta, kia mā taratara ki tai. E hia ki ana te ātakura, he tio, he huka, he hauhu, ti hei mauri ora. I have apologies for Yurif, who may join online when he can. I have apologies for lateness from Mike Paku, who will join us at 10 a.m. Are there any further apologies, Peter?
We haven't received it.
Charles Lambert?
Absence.
Okay. Can I have a mover and a seconder to accept those? Councillor Sears and Councillor Williams. All those who agree say aye. Those against, carried. Just some housekeeping rules for everyone. We've heard it 1,000 times, but it doesn't hurt to hear it one more time. This meeting is being live streamed on Council Facebook page and recorded for viewing at a later date on our YouTube channel. And in the event of an earthquake, drop, cover and hold. If the shaking is long and strong, when shaking subsides, leave the building through the nearest exit and proceed immediately towards Napier Hill along Dalton Street to Tiffin Park, continuing up the steps to Cameron Road. In the event of evacuation, if emergency alarm sounds, immediately evacuate the building through the nearest exit and proceed to the assembly area on the grass at the corner of Dalton and Voltaire Streets. The council chamber is currently designated as a public place, and the council's policy is that 1 metre physical distance. Well, no, that's an old COVID rule, so no. And toilets are located down the hall to the left of the council chamber. How did that sneak in there?
I have no idea.
Oh, boy. Okay, so next on the agenda is conflict of interest declarations. Are there any for today's item? There are none. Item 3, confirmation of minutes from the last meeting held on the 30th of October. If you were present, do you have any need for alterations? If not, can I please have a mover, Councillor Hardy and Councillor Foley? All those who agree say aye.
Aye.
Those against, carried. Okay, we move on to our main item, which are recommendations from the Napier Hastings Future Development Strategy Joint Committee. But before we do that, we have 2 speakers willing to speak in the public forum part of today. First, we have Warren Ladbroke, representing RDMC Limited. And then we have Richard Gedham from Save the Plains Group. You both have 5 minutes each, and actually standing orders allows for questions. So we will have time for questions if you do, knowing that there will be public submissions at a stage and hearings at the right stage once the Joint Committee has concluded the process of adopting and then going out for submission. Ka pai? So please invite you, Warren, come to the front. Yes, please. Do you have a presentation or was it all verbal?
No, it's a verbal.
Okay.
Well, I'm happy to email it to anyone if they'd like.
Fantastic. And if you could just start with who you're representing and what site you're talking to.
Sure.
Kia ora. Thank you.
Sure. Morning. My name is Warren Ladbroke. As mentioned, I'm Director of RDMC Limited, but I'm here in a capacity today representing a number of different parties for different interests. Those parties include the Crown, Te Kahanunu, and other stakeholders and investors. The project that we're referring to is termed Riverbend Road NC4B in the FDS documentation. So I appreciate the opportunity to address you today. It looks like you have a very busy and long day ahead. I'll try and be brief. It has come to our attention that the area referred to as Riverbend Road may again be raised as an issue in terms of inclusion in the motions proposed today. I understand the issue, if raised, is that the sites are flood risk. I'm here to remind you that the reality is the Hiratonga Plains are floodplains. So by that definition, a flood risk. With the opportunities they provide, there are challenges. There's no easy sites left, but we're up for the challenges. I'm sure many looked over the plains 150 odd years ago and said that it would not be possible to build here. But here we are. February 2022 was a reminder to us that we must work hard with what we have and what we propose to achieve a robust and sustainable result. Riverbend Road is in HBUDs, so is already earmarked urban for future residential development. It has decades of accumulated knowledge, experience and work by the relevant territorial authorities and others. It is already basically surrounded by residential and community assets such as Puki Puki Muki Marae. Some are old, some are new. The new have not flooded. The old are now being addressed by engineered solutions, some, for example, funded by the Infrastructure Acceleration Fund, which will also include redirection of stormwater, which is currently directed to the Riverbend Road sites. We have put 5 years' work and millions of dollars into a design agreed with Napier City Council and their specialist external consultant engineers for the proposed development of these sites, resulting in a private development and an infrastructure agreement with Napier City Council. Primary in all of this work has in fact been the stormwater design solution. The stormwater solution proposed provides significantly more than the development requires, supporting the wider stormwater catchment of existing developed areas. It is illogical to look at Riverbend Road as it is and not understand the proposed design solution. It is illogical to single it out against others proposed in the motions today. For example, the immediately adjacent FDS plan references NC4A and 4D. The relatively recent Te Awa development is an example of an engineered solution working. Our design is far superior. The FDS is a process that was started over 2 years ago. We have engaged from the outset, providing all information and requested reports and independent assessments for the independent review by Barkers and others, and the subsequent extensive joint committee review. We have satisfied them that Riverbend Road warrants robust consideration through a full consenting process. Riverbend Road is not contrary to the objectives of the FDS, and it is needed to achieve sufficient development capacity, including the 20% competitive margin. It is a project focused on affordable housing, designed with extensive stakeholder, community and mana whenua engagement. We have always been and remain available to Hawke's Bay Regional Council and its councillors to discuss the merits of the proposed development and the proposed stormwater solution. Regional Council office have been consulted and kept up to date throughout the design process. The FDS process is only one of the initial hurdles for any site development. What is in front of the councillors today is the opportunity to put all of the sites identified by the FDS process to a substantive merits consideration consenting process with expert evidence.
That's fine. Yeah.
Are we concluding?
I've got one paragraph. Is that all right?
Yep.
Okay. Not assumption. We are saying we can satisfy the requirements of that, and we are saying we deserve the opportunity to do that. To oppose the inclusion of Riverbend Road in the proposed motions today would be disrespectful to the work to date of the joint committee partners and the project and community stakeholders. Further, it would weaken the credibility of the entire FDS exercise, already significantly delayed and potentially now undermined in terms of procedural propriety. My submission today is that the motions as presented are passed as presented. With respect, it is no longer for the councillors in the room to judge the merits of any particular site or application. In the case of this FDS process, it is now for the independently appointed panel or an independently appointed panel and public notified process that has already been agreed to by this council and others on a joint basis. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Warren. And just a reminder, this is a public forum, sharing information and not so much a submission. You'll have that in hearing. Are there any questions for Warren? There aren't any. Thank you so much.
Appreciate your time. Thank you.
Can I please invite Richard Gaddam up on behalf of Save the Plains Group?
Oh, good morning, everybody, and thank you very much for allowing me to speak. I didn't expect this, so it came as a surprise, so thank you. Last night I sent you all an email. Maybe some of you have read it. Maybe some haven't, but I implore you to not only read the email, but read also the attachment. The attachment is vital that you read that. I'm just going to tell you a little story about, a short story about South Puramai. South Puramai is 61.6 hectares. And to date, it's been farmed by a guy called Gareth Holder, a vegetable grower, and he has cropped. Actually, before I start that, I'd just like to introduce myself. Some of you have heard me speak here before. I represent the Save the Plains Group, and we've been going now, or in operation, about the last 5 years, and we have been battling for that time to try and protect the fertile soils on our beautiful Hiratonga Plains. It's been 2 steps forward and about 3 back, and now that we've seen the FDS document, it's like about 10 steps backwards. So we're pretty motivated to continue the battle and protect what really is our most prized asset, for not only us as residents in Hawke's Bay, but for our local economy. So just getting back to South Puramai, it's been farmed by a guy called Gareth Holder, a vegetable grower, for about the last 30 years. The block is LUC Class 3. However, he produces wonderful vegetable crops in this area, even though it is Class 3 soil. And he says, and I quote, I got this quote from him, though fitting into the LUC Class 3 category, it definitely isn't poor production, waterlogged soils. It is strong soil that produces a significant amount of high-value fresh vegetables and fruit, including neighbouring cherries, kiwi fruit and apples. Gareth was shocked when he heard that this block is included in the FDS. We as a group, so he's highlighting the actual strength of that block, and putting it to houses he feels is a travesty. We as a group have been motivated by this FDS, and just recently we got together with industry leaders in Hawke's Bay, and we've discussed our pathway forward to actually trying to amend this document. Included is a long discussion with a guy called Bruce Mackay who runs Watties. He's horrified, of course, and I guess we can liken what's happening now to what's happening in the sheep and beef industry, with the forestry moving in and chasing sheep off, and how it's affecting not only our meat industry but also our economy as far as communities and infrastructure with all the roading and things. You will note that there's a freezing works that's closed.
1 minute warning. Yep.
So I just implore you to look at this really seriously, because this is a very serious matter, and it's going to affect not only us now, but future generations. And if we don't do something now to try and hold it, future generations are going to look back on us and say, what the hell were we doing? Why didn't they actually put a line in the sand and say, enough is enough, and let's redirect our progress for future development into unproductive land? Why do we have to keep filling up houses with concrete and asphalt with houses that's destroying this amazing asset forever? Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Richard, and thank you for sharing those views with us, both of you. I hope you do stay for the item, which is next.
Sorry?
Our decision item, which is next.
Okay.
Hopefully you can stay. Thank you.
Any questions?
Did we have any questions for Richard?
All right.
Yeah, I've got one.
Oh, right.
Come up
Sorry,
to the front.
Thank you, Richard. Look, at one level, the justification under the FDS for tidying up bits of extra, bringing extra bits of land in and around city fringes essentially, is tidying up, efficient use of infrastructure and just tidying up. In your experience, you've been around for a while, without being too rude, Richard, slightly longer than me possibly. Do you have, from your perspective, what can you tell us about what your expectation about whether this is a one-off or whether this is just a continuance of a creep, which is just ongoing and without firm action will just carry on indefinitely?
How long have I got to answer that question?
About a minute.
About a minute.
About
yeah.
a minute, okay.
Your experience.
If you can imagine, this piece of paper here is, say, like Hastings, but there's been developments going on around it over the years, and incrementally it's been spreading out because it's easier and cheaper for the council to do that. The infrastructure's there, so we just put a T joint in the water pipe and in the road, and we just go out there. And then what they're doing now is that they're just infilling because it's tidying things up. I had a meeting with Nigel Bickle, and I said, this middle road area, I said, you can't do that. That is beautiful land down there. And he said, Red, well, we've got CDL on Middle Road side, we've got Ryman on the Tiati side, which should never have happened. We've got Havelock there. What we're doing was we're just tidying it up. We're just filling in the gaps. And this is what councils have been doing for decades and decades, and it's just not on. We can't keep doing this. We've got to now look and focus on unproductive land where we can put these, our people, and house our people. I've done a development, well, the comment comes back to me, well, Richard, the infrastructure costs are so much higher on unproductive land. But I've done a subdivision on unproductive land, and I paid for all the infrastructure myself, everything. The council paid nothing. And at the end, they hit me with development levies. I've gifted the infrastructure back to the council. So they've taken no risk, they've had no cost, and now they're collecting rates. So, I just can't follow it at all. It's unbelievable.
Thank
I
you,
could have gone on longer, Zan,
Thank you, Rich.
you can see how passionate I am about it, along with my friend Mike Donnelly here.
Thanks for coming in.
Thank you, Richard. Really appreciate it. Right, that ends our public forum section. So we move on to our decision items. So if I can please invite Katrina and Gavin to introduce the paper.
Thank you. Good morning. It's a bit of a tag team from Gavin and I. We'll take the paper as read, but we thought it might be useful just to have a bit of a recap of where we've been, how we've got here, and what the decision is today. Up on your screen, you'll need to share that, please, is the process to date. You'll note that the process has started in 2023 with technical groups, staff mainly, and then the Joint Committee first met in April 2023. Just speaking briefly to the future development strategy, it is being developed under subpart 4 of the National Policy Statement on Urban Development. It sets out the requirements that must be met for an FDS for every Tier 2 urban environment. This includes both Napier and Hastings. Tier 2 is based on population growth and the need for planning long-term strategic planning to have sufficient development capacity for 30 years of residential and industrial demand or commercial demand. And it's to encourage integration of planning decisions with infrastructure planning and funding. The Local Government Act, excuse me, special consultative procedure must be used, that is submissions and hearings. The recommended strategy before you is a statement of proposal for the consultation process that was agreed at the Joint Committee on in October, sorry, can't call the date, of October, this just last month, that landed on the draft proposal before you. It provides a range of housing choices in different locations. And on that, I just want to highlight that the strategy identifies 50% of all new growth should be residential intensification of the urban area. It minimises new residential growth in low-lying and land, with the exception of the area south of Napier, which is in the existing HPUD's plan. The new residential greenfield growth is provided for in Havelock North, Flaxmere and Hastings. That's in the long term, 10 plus years, with new business signalled in the Severn precinct, the short to medium term, and Irongate in the long term aspirations. Today and in the next few days, Hastings, Napier and yourselves are all meeting, obviously, to adopt the draft proposal.
Oh, kia ora, Tanya. Sorry, you might have to mute. We're getting feedback.
So to enable public consultation to be undertaken between the 23rd of November and the 23rd of December. An independent hearings panel has been appointed or will be appointed. It was agreed at the last meeting, and they will hear the submissions and make decisions that then will be ratified by the councils as a final FDS adopted by the three partner councils in June 2025. Happy to take questions.
Thank you, Katrina. Could you just clarify for us how alike the decisions have to be made between the three councils in terms of today and for the adoption after the hearings?
So between the three councils, the majority decision will be taken to determine what goes out for public consultation. Those dissenting councils or council will be noted on the consultation documents as having dissented how and what and the reasons for that.
Okay, so it doesn't have to be unanimous?
No.
No. Okay, thank you. That helps very much.
All right. So there would still be an FDS, just picking up, Chair, if you don't mind,
Yes.
still be an FDS if we were if we were to, in some respect, differ from the position adopted by Hastings and Napier, there would still be an FDS for consultation.
That's correct. They would have the majority and we would go out with the FDS.
As the majority.
As the majority.
And at the end of the process, you get the recommendation or the decision back from the independent panel. Are we bound by that decision? A nasty question.
That's a particularly interesting question. Chair, I would, through you, I would need to confirm that, but I would expect that we would be bound by that in so much as presumably we could then appeal that decision, but I will need to come back to you on that. That would be interesting.
Yes. I know
Okay.
there's a lot of issues and it is quite a complex area, that one, so I'm just intrigued. Thank you.
Councillor Sears.
Good, thank
Kia
you.
ora.
To you, Chair. Two very basic questions. One, just confirming that under the recommendations B, Councillor Williams, Councillor Corbyn moved the amendment to remove Middle Road and Middle Road extension, and that was carried. So even though we see that in the draft strategy, those will be removed from the consultation document.
So through you, Chair, the Middle Road extension was not carried. The Middle Road extension was Am I, you
We're both
jump in and
carried.
tell me I'm wrong.
They were both carried.
Both were
Both carried.
Riverview Road, one
Yep.
was a Riverview Road one.
Oh, sorry, my apologies, I've got it round the wrong way.
Not carried.
My apologies, I'm
Yes.
getting wrong. Riverbend Road was not carried, Middle Road was.
Both.
So they'll be removed from the strategy as per the paper if we were to adopt the recommendation in the paper.
Only in so much as the majority decision.
Yeah,
So if
based
Napier and Hastings, both on the 19th, their council meetings recommend to put those sites in, and they, with a majority,
Oh, so they're putting those back in?
I don't know,
Okay,
no
Possibly.
idea.
Possibly.
thank you.
Yes,
Just
one-
to follow up.
yes.
Okay, that's useful. It's really, that makes it particularly complicated. So just to be really clear, kind of 101 for anyone else who's watching, this gets adopted, let's say as proposed, let's say all three
Correct.
councils go for that.
Yep.
We go out to consultation to public or to all the community. Those submissions come back into what has now been agreed to the independent hearings panel.
Yes.
At that point, can any of the councils also make submissions on the strategy themselves? The reason I'm asking is when we have a joint strategy like this and three councils have all compromised around differing needs or priorities within their own core business, it may be that we've adopted a policy that is not acceptable to everyone. Does the option still remain open for each council to submit to the independent hearings committee in the usual manner?
Through Chair, yes.
Thank you.
Fantastic. Councillor Harding.
Sure, Chair, and through you, question for staff, but just a slight context in that whilst we used in Hawke's Bay to have this thing called HBUD, which is essentially a Napier and Hastings JV, this is different. This appears to be, we are, as the Tier 2 authority, this is our responsibility to have housing bottom lines in our regional policy statement. So this is new territory. So we actually own, we're in that territory, that RPS is binding, right, on the region. So we ultimately have to have our own power and our own discretion to decide what we put in our RPS. And so the answer to the question about what happens as a result of the panel's decision is really, really important. My question, though, is what additional, if any, provisions may we want to introduce along with the housing bottom line around standards, for example? Is it open to us to put in flood standards, drainage standards? Because these are the this is the open question. This opens a whole area of jurisdiction that we don't currently have. So is it blind to just a number,
Yep.
or can it come with standards?
Good question. Katrina.
Through you, Chair. Well, complicated question, I might add.
Most of it was just
Yep, I get that.
statement rather than
So,
question.
to be clear, the FDS does not come into the RPS, two different things. So the FDS is prepared for sufficient development capacity for 30 years of demand. And then, so that sets out where new residential and industrial land will go. Our RPS can certainly, the regional policy statement, it can be directive on avoiding hazards, flooding, coastal erosion, all sorts of hazards we can identify in the RPS, and direct the district councils to give effect to that. They can do that through subdivision standards in their plans. We would identify through the hazards portal owned and the regional policy statement and owned by the region, the hazards portal, the hazards that exist and identify, and Chris is at the back, I might get this wrong, 50 and 100-year return periods. Those then feed into infrastructure standards through infrastructure strategies at district council and subdivision standards in a district plan. That is not for this council to set subdivision standards.
No, but we can set risk standards,
We identify the risks that should be avoided.
or that must be avoided.
No.
that depends on how that is articulated in the regional policy statement, and that is subject to the special consultative procedure and plan-making process. So it could be a may, must, should.
So we have the power to at least attempt to add standards.
To set direction.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Williams.
Thank you. I just had a question whether Katrina or Gavin or anyone has received advice from Craig Goodyear as to the efficacy or otherwise of the stormwater attenuation measures that Mr Ladbroke described, and their view on that in relation to what the site report identifies as that area being severely impacted by a number of natural hazard risks, including tsunami, flooding, and liquefaction. You had advice directly from Mr Goodyear about, for example, as presented in the COVID fast track application, how confident he was in those mitigation measures?
Through you, Chair, HBRC was asked for comments as part of the fast track consenting proposal for that site. We have not, and so we were provided with, I think, some reports at that time to review for our flood modellers. We have not had any more input in that, but we will do through consenting process. I can read, for the benefit of the council, the comments that we provided to the fast track. They are public comments. They might be useful.
Yes.
At that time, council officers said filling the development area would remove the amount of storage from the county drain system. You heard Mr Ladbroke talking about that. And that if no mitigation were provided, there would be an effect on the primary residential area being the next lowest area to receive the stormwater. The applicant has proposed to drain the stormwater from the development site to the Cross County Drain. I always get that wrong. This solution needs to take into consideration the potential effects of removing the storage from the county drain system. The impact of that is not yet understood. And I'm not reading all of this, just the main points, please. A stormwater servicing solution could potentially be developed that could provide for overall benefits to the drainage network in this area. However, there is likely to be a need for a relatively large pump station and a large storage area within the development site. We also commented on stormwater quality because it is in the source protection zones for Napier City Council's public water supply bore. So certainly our council stormwater engineers have said there's some risk. There may be an engineering solution, and we would need to work through that with the developer.
Thank you. It's been very helpful.
Thank you. Councillor Curtin. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. You could indulge me with a series of questions here. I go to paragraph 38 of the paper, and it's in regard to no surprises here for Riverbend Road. First, I'll go to paragraph 40. I'll stick with paragraph 38. In terms of process, can we just go back a step? That's a motion moved to remove the Riverbend Road element in NC4B from the draft strategy. Mm-hmm. How did it get in the draft strategy in the first place to require if you like, follow-up action to try and get it out? You know, how did it get in there? Who put it in there?
I'm going to let Gavin speak to the process on that one, thanks.
I'll try and keep this relatively brief, but as one of the presenters mentioned, the Riverbend Road area has previously been and is still currently identified within the Hiratonga Plains Urban Development Strategy as an indicatively suitable location for residential development.
Okay.
So that was a starting point to bring those ones forward.
Can I stop you there? Because 38.7 B11 says the area is not included in the Hiratonga Plains Urban Development Strategy.
Yeah.
I need to clarify, that's how that came about. I've got, if you indulge me, Chair. We put up a combined motion for Middle Road and this site, setting out generic grounds across all three. And that's just been replicated into both areas, but the issue with here is 6, the land is subject to severe flooding risk. The land is included in the Hiratonga Plains Urban Development Strategy, so that ground, 7, doesn't apply to that site, it applies to the Middle Road site.
So that's an error in that.
It's not an error, but it's been copied out, it's out of context. The ground that applies to that site is 6 and 8.
So I strike
And
out
5.
not.
That's
Yes.
right.
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah,
right.
so just to take it back, so the HPUD strategy was the starting position
Sure,
for the NPS
sure.
UD.
So in order to
And then
override
more.
that, a motion came forward to remove it from the strategy, given that it was already in it. Is that how I read that?
At the last moment, there's been a whole, as we showed you in the process of development of the FDS, we started with the position of HPUDs, and then we've gone out to the public and called for additional sites that any persons would want to include
Sure.
in.
Okay, I understand your
And the
process.
assessment done on those
Sure.
sites that were received.
And-
By officers and the Joint Committee.
I get you. So now turning to the motion that was put and the vote thereon, so paragraph 40, can you tell me what the, if you like, protocol is or agreements made for the Joint Committee in terms of their voting process? So what we've had by my reading of this is 3 for the, and congratulations to the Regional Council's 3 votes for. Then we've had 3 against, and then abstentions. How many abstentions were there? Well, at least
3,
approx.
yeah,
10 maybe?
10, okay, so a big number of
Majority.
abstentions.
Majority.
quite a lot.
Yeah, so we've got the retention of 6. We've got the retention of this element in the strategy based on a very small number of supporters for it. Is that how I read this?
Through you, Chair, I don't think we can comment on why the other parties have
Well, no, I'm
abstended
not
and whether
asking.
they support or
I'm not
not.
asking that. I'm saying that's the fact. So therefore, my question is, what protocol or voting processes were in place? Was it a simple majority on the day, on the vote, on the floor, or was there some other methodology by way of agreement or consensus around voting?
Through you, it was a vote on the day. The Joint Committee had workshopped through all of the sites proposed in, or put up as the draft proposal over the life of the Joint Committee. And it wasn't until the vote in October last month to adopt the draft proposal
So
that
you
it
weren't
became apparent that there was objection
Differences, sure.
or support.
So the committee weren't working on a consensus basis.
So I guess you're asking, what are the standing orders for voting? And is it the majority?
Majority.
It's a majority.
So it wasn't a
Yeah.
consensus committee as such.
No.
Thank you for that. Now, I just want to turn, and Mr. Dolly might be able to help here. You've mentioned staff comment on the efficacy of mitigation in that zone by way of engineering solutions, I suspect. Have staff worked on the cost thereof of that mitigation? And is there further cost to apply to the stormwater network in that zone, and I'm referencing the impacts on the waterways at the Purmo Stream, Beatson Drain, Plantation Drain. So all of that network, what are the implications for those open waterways and the costs thereof for this type of development?
Through you, Chair, until this council receives an application for consent, we won't be able to analyse any costs on HBRC's network. We won't be able to determine appropriateness of engineering solutions. The application to the fast track process gives very limited time and for a council to respond. We have less than a week. So we have not been able to do that, but we will in time when an application is received, and we have not received an application to date.
I hear what you're saying and I accept that. However, at this point, we're looking to advance a major strategy which will have significant implications for our plan. And I'm interested to know the advice and implications for this council, not Napier City, nor Hastings, this council, as a result of adopting this particular element of this plan.
Understood. Through you, Chair, that could apply to any site that's currently included in the FDS. Despite a site being included in the FDS, does not guarantee consent for development will be granted. It still must go through all the appropriate checks and balances of consenting frameworks. And so that could be said for example, discharges out of Irongate into the Irongate stream where we've got issues or concerns around flooding risk there. That has to be able to be left to the appropriate consenting process. We don't have enough information on this site or any other site that's included in the FDS to make those decisions right now.
Do we have any high-level ideas of impact?
No.
And just to clarify, I assume this is the work of the joint committee, which didn't go into those aspects of these sites.
The work of the joint committee will determine, based on the criteria that incorrect. The joint committee has identified appropriate sites based on the criteria that they developed through the process for selecting sites. The hearing panel will then hear submissions for and against, but also will not make decisions on consentability, only on the provisions of the NPS that are provided.
Thank you. Councillor Roadley.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Katrina. I note the timing of the strategy being developed, pretty critical events happening February 23. From a person who does not live on the plains, was not here post-Cyclone Gabrielle, has a lens been put over these new sites that has Cyclone Gabrielle on one side and how those areas performed during that time, and also the recommendations that have come out of the flood review? Has that lens been put over these, and what are your thoughts from that view?
Certainly in terms of the former, has a lens been put across the work and the assessment of all these various sites that were put forward? Yes, we did have some intel from ourselves and external providers about what were the locations that were impacted and inundated post-Cyclone Gabrielle. So that was a spatial data set that was overlaid on top of soils, on top of fault rupture lines, and on top of various other things. In terms of implications arising from the independent flood review report and
Could you
recommendations.
just, before you go there, what did that lens tell you when you did that?
Bearing in mind that Cyclone Gabrielle was one event, and say the November 2020 Napier flooding event was a different beast altogether, no two events are the same. It did affirm that the low-lying areas that we thought were low-lying were
Low-lying.
low-lying.
So they were inundated, is what you're saying? Okay, yeah.
Could engineering works mitigate the inundation risks? Yeah, potentially, but at what cost? And as Katrina Brunton was referring to, those sorts of details need to be assessed and worked through on if and when a resource consent application is lodged.
And then from the recommendations out of the flood review?
That lens has been brought to the table, and probably by our own councillor representatives on the Joint Committee have also implicitly at least brought that to the table. It is still a work in progress, I guess, and this FDS presents an opportunity for this council and the three partner councils to kind of take stock. Are we heading in the right directions, post lessons and learnings from the independent flood review?
And Katrina, I also recall from that those recommendations that there was a request for this council to be more directive in our policy statement and using the words direct.
Correct.
Is that what you're thinking? This is where we're.
Certainly the Hawke's Bay Independent Flood Review has recommended to this council that we take a much stronger position and be more directive to the district councils in terms of development and avoiding unacceptable flood risk.
But am I also hearing that you have a level of comfort that that will come through the next processes as they apply for consents and as they develop their own district plans around these, to give effect to that directive is enough to stop people having houses flooded, waking up in the middle of the night with water in their beds?
Through you, Chair, I think absolutely we need to be very clear, the partner councils, to all of the landowners that are implicated in the FDS, that this does not guarantee consent, and they must have regard to hazards. The regional council will absolutely be party to those consent applications and direct where possible. We do have some direction in our current RPS. It is not as strong, obviously, as the HBOFR has indicated. It's not as strong as it needs to be. And until we have an RPS that is stronger, it puts us in somewhat of a difficult position to be more directive. However, as a regional council, it is our function to highlight this.
However, I'm just scratching at the surface of we're not going to repeat the untenable position of what has occurred at the bottom of Tangoio Valley there.
Certainly, this regional council and its officers would be advocating very strongly to avoid that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Williams.
I'm actually proposing, unless there's any further questions, to move the recommendations with an amendment.
Yep, sure. I will just check off that there are no other questions. Okay, go ahead.
The recommendations are 1 through to 2.5.
Yes.
I want to move an amendment that there be a new 4 added.
Yes.
NC 4B, Riverbend Road, excluded.
Can we have the right block name in
Capitals NC.
4B, sorry.
Capitals NC 4 little b
Yes,
dash Riverbend Road,
Yes.
bracket, excluded, bracket.
excluded. Okay.
So where are you putting this? Which, can you read?
It goes into 2.1b, Roman numeral 4. And that there be an additional reason recorded for 4, that the area is subject to severe flooding risk. I can speak to some of the questions that have been put to the staff.
Yes.
I can speak to that motion, and I'd like the opportunity to do so, but that's the motion I want to put.
Thank you. No other amendments? Everything else sits as it is.
And second that, Madam Chair.
You'd like to second that? Okay. Councillor Williams?
Yeah, thank you. Look, thank you to the Chair firstly for allowing our two public forum presenters. I think it's incredibly important that both those presenters participate vigorously in the hearing process. And for Mr Ladbroke's part, that will provide him the natural justice opportunity to say how all of the mitigation can work effectively that he's describing in terms of offsetting both the effects of, what having with the county drain development within that site, but providing wider benefits for the stormwater network. And the panel may well recommend that that site go back in. I guess my point is that I cannot, in good conscience, stand behind or be part of a resolution that stands behind inclusion of an area which, on the face of it, the information in front of me, is the worst of the areas in that part of Napier. To Mr Ladbroke's point, it is deeper compared to the adjacent properties. The mapping that I have in front of me shows that the risks are severe. That word is used, severely. That's not a word that you often find used. To quote the independent flooding panel review, which was of interest to Councillor Roadley, we have been advised to ensure that new and intensified development is prohibited in areas subject of unacceptable flood risk. We will ultimately be the drafters of a regional policy statement, which is not bound by this future development strategy and which could include a policy directing local authorities to avoid, which they will then need to apply as prohibit. In the meantime, as I say, Mr Ladbroke has an opportunity through this process to persuade the independent hearings panel that those concerns are unfounded. My understanding is that the hearings panel recommendations go back to the joint committee. We can, dug into the papers during the course of this conversation, we can actually reject those recommendations, in which case they have to go back to the panel. The ultimate decision at the end of the day does rest with us as partner councils, however. So it's not the end of the road for anyone, and I'd also say that to Mr Gaddam, just because areas are included, there is absolutely nothing to stop that group from persuading the panel to recommend to the committee that we haven't gone far enough in terms of sustaining protecting the Heretaunga Plains. Just to note, the intensification target here is actually 60% over the long term. No, not 50%, 60%, as with HPUDs. And what I would say is that overall there's been an incredible job and an incredible amount of work done by the consultants. There's literally thousands of pages of reports standing behind all of this, navigating a fraught landscape of constraints around mana whenua values, natural hazards, transport and infrastructure, emissions, and obviously the precious Heretaunga Plains soils. We are assuming the upper end of the range within the market economics reports of what this region can tolerate culturally in terms of intensification. They have done sort of a high and low scenario testing, and the figures in the capacity and demand parameters in the strategy adopt the upper end there. So it is ambitious actually as to how much intensification this strategy in itself represents to comply with the NPSUD. But there is, as you can see from the paper, a surplus. There was a surplus of around 1,400 houses. I think with Ahuriri Station now included and even removing the Middle Road sites and Riverbend Road, you've still got about a 1,200 surplus, and that's on top of the 20% contingency that's in there. So this is actually going to put a lot of planning tension in terms of driving intensification. But there is 160 hectares of land in there that's not in HPUDs, and if we remove the two middle road sites, that comes down to 110 hectares. It's not in HPUDs, about 100 of which are actually for industrial. So I think it strikes a reasonable balance for presentation to the community for consultation. It's by no means the end of the road. Our regional policy statement, following hopefully an attempt at broader regional spatial planning, won't be bound by this. I'm with Councillor Harding that I think a lot of the intensification or new development needs to head to Central Hawke's Bay, away from areas that are prone to liquefaction, tsunami risk, and off the Heretaunga Plains. So this is by no means the end of the road, but I think it's a reasonable balance and a reasonable compromise subject to those amendments that I've outlined. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Really robust statement there. Councillor Curtin.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. And the first thing I want to do is to congratulate my colleagues sitting on the committee who have done an outstanding job in terms of voicing the position of the Regional Council, and the staff who've had strenuous advocacy around the if you like, particularly the flooding issues for development of the plains, but also in other environmental impacts. So I think we've done our job from our end. I do want to take up Ms Brunton's observation around the fact that the adoption of the strategy itself, in its final conclusion, does not guarantee a resource consent can be issued. I would put back to her, however, that it opens the door some considerable distance, particularly in regard to our current RMA settings, and it certainly will not be assisted by a much more liberal approach by policymakers and lawmakers in the current situation. So this becomes a very important, critical issue for this council, because there are wide-ranging implications from this particular, even the consultation processes. The inclusion, for example, of the Riverbend Road element in the strategy is most unfortunate, even more so that it got its nose back in the trough, and I'm disappointed that, in fact, that was done in the manner which it has. The implications for council are very, very significant, and that's why, Madam Chair, I asked the question around what analysis we've done as to the implications of placing, in this situation, 660 odd houses into the zone, the impacts of the surrounding areas also, Willowbank Road, etc. So when you hard pack and put roofs everywhere, you need a very, very substantial mitigation to at least even get us to where we are today, which is calamitous at best. So my point is this: there's no way that it's affordable to mitigate the impacts of this development in tandem with others, the other developments proposed. There's no way that this council has factored in the impact on the zones feeding into and coming out of this proposed development. What intrigues me, Madam Chair, is this 3-vote situation where our representatives on the committee have quite justly and with the evidence voted against such a proposal to include or wanted to have it removed, and the vote from 3 other representatives, the Mayor of Napier, the Mayor of Napier, and Mayor of Napier, Mayor of Hastings, and I think Councillor Bogue from Napier, in an extraordinary situation where, in the case of the Hastings District Council, a council which has put people in harm's way to the most extreme extent in recent times, and we only need to
Councillor
go
Curtin, can I
to...
just warn you that the views of that committee, please abstain. Please abstain from the views of those committee members.
Well, look, Madam Chair, what I'm pointing
Can we
out...
wrap this up?
What I'm trying to get at is we've had the support, major support from the leaders of the two district councils in an area where there's extreme jeopardy to the citizens of this city. And I'm intrigued to know why, and what offers have been made to Napier City to get such a support in place, and what trade-offs have been made to get Hastings involved. Where Councillor Bogue sits, I have no idea. The other intriguing element, and which I'm disappointed about, are the abstentions. And this is where tangata whenua need to step up. You need to vote around that table. If you want to support and support the Māori population, who are the people that will be living in this zone and most impacted, get out and vote accordingly. This has a huge impact on Māori, and I'm most disappointed that those representatives around that table chose not to recognise the danger and to make sure the Māori people who are likely to be living in this zone are protected. And that's my major concern in this, Madam Chair. And finally, I believe we may see our way through this, and I'm pleased Councillor Williams very adroitly has inserted a condition on adopting the resolution, adopting the draft strategy for consultation, and inserted that we should indeed exclude the Napier zone and put those other councils on notice that we're not going to go down without a fight on this issue. It's too important to this council.
Thank you, Councillor Curtin. Councillor Sears.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I will support the recommendation with the amendment, with the comment that I would have preferred to adopt the draft recommendations as they stand, given that we were working with our partner councils and worked through a long process together. As I say, there's always competing interests. However, given the direction from our independent flood review and our role in managing these risks, I don't think it would be tenable for us to support this with the addition of Riverbend Road. But as I understand it, the other two councils will be quite clear in adopting it as it stands, which means that Riverbend Road will sit in there as part of the consultation and will give the opportunity for our presenter today to go through that process. So I do support it, and thank you. While I was alternate on that, Councillor Williams and Councillor McIntosh did the heavy lifting in there. So thank you. It was a really long and involved process to get to this point.
Thank you, Councillor Sears. Are there any other speakers? Councillor Harding and then Mike.
Yeah, kia ora, Chair. Look, it's of immense frustration to me that this process provides for housing out to 2054, 4 years after we should have reached net zero for our region, our country and our world. And yet this process doesn't give us the ability to plan and provide in that context. It simply doesn't. Unfortunately, we're in a construct which forces us to just look at Napier and Hastings, and with all the will in the world, that is what the FDS process requires. We're also in a situation where we know it is proven that our current RPS, which this will eventually amend, is relatively toothless to deal with natural hazard as it currently stands. This council has tried on multiple occasions to intervene and failed. And Tanoio Beach settlement is a classic example where we have submitted against development and yet development has gone ahead. So in that context, until we have the strong RPS and the strong direction and the ability to, for all natural hazards, be far more directive about risk, we're going to have to muddle through. And so with my preference in an ideal world would be that the ultimate test for all of these pieces of land is at the consenting process. But we can't there because we know that we fail in our duties at that final hurdle by current processes. So that's why I support the amendment as proposed. Thank you.
Thank you, councillor Harding. Mike, kia ora.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Apologies for being late. I'm mindful that I'm sitting in Councillor Van Beek's chair, and some of the gentleman who originates from a country that's below sea level, and he reminds us at every possible opportunity that he comes from a country that's used to dealing with flooding on a daily basis. So within that, I'm certainly not opposed to the proposed amendment that Councillor Williams has put forward for the reasons that he has stated. I also acknowledge the fact that, as he has stated, there is still the opportunity for the promoters, if they choose to continue to put their views and forward from various processes in the future. But in saying that, I would hope that this council has been consistent in regards to its policies, in regards to supporting developments in what are not only flood-prone areas, but also areas of climate warming, so that there's some consistency within this. And the reason why I state this, and I do take the point from the wise corner over there in regards to the impacts such social development housing has on Māori, and that we normally find ourselves on some of the poorest soils and the most at-risk properties when it comes to doing social housing in regards to, and that will come back to a question of the economics of those developments and looking to drive the lowest possible cost structure. But I'm also mindful that Māori entities find themselves promoting such developments because as part of their settlement, the lands that they got back as part of their economic and cultural redress are some of our poorest soils, poorest lands left within the region. So for mana whenua, at times we are caught in this undesirable balance. I mean, trying to provide suitable and safe housing, warm, dry housing for our whānau, as well as trying to derive an economic future for our whānau and up. So for me, it is about that consistency. I think as long as the council has that consistency going forward, I certainly support that. I do take the point in regards to our other councils, our other local territorial authorities and the positions that they may have. And although we may disapprove of those directions, I think we need to focus on what our direction is. And make sure we voice those for the right reasons. Kia ora tātou.
Kia ora, thank you, Mike. Councillor McIntosh.
Thanks, Chair. I found that a really useful addition to the discussions we've had around the table as part of the joint committee. One area that we haven't really chatted about today is that of intensification. We can't have our cake and eat it. Nobody likes urban creep. But if you talk about making a 700 metre section a 350 metre one, then a lot of people moan about that too. You can't have both. What I would say is that cities around the globe that intensify almost always end up with better results as long as it's good urban design. So I think as far as we're concerned, we've got to get with the program. We can't moan about urban creep unless we're prepared to bite the bullet as far as intensification is concerned. So that's the only point that we hadn't really covered that I wanted to talk about.
Very good, thank you, Councillor McIntosh. Are there any other speakers? I'd just like to thank our guests for coming today and sharing their views once again, and also just to reflect on how significant it is for this council, for the Regional Planning Committee, that a priority theme that we're working on currently is natural hazards and the risks of where we build that's appropriate to flood risks, to inundation, to coastal hazards as we move forward. Because we have seen from Cyclone Gabrielle that we have had to create land categorisation from the government also there with us and have to go through that process of we should never have built there in the first place. So lessons learned from our independent flood review as well as the evidence that we have here today. And if in fact through the consenting process those are mitigated, then that's at that stage that can be done. So this is no means the end of this process. But for us as a council, we have a directive, we have a priority around natural hazards. And in that's why I support the amendment proposed by Councillor Williams. You have the right of reply, Councillor Williams.
No, that's fine, thank you, Chair. I've said everything I want to say.
Thank you. Okay, those recommendations are on the table. All those who agree say aye.
Aye.
Those against? Carried unanimously.
So we've
Thank
moved the
you.
amendment and the amendment's become the motion and now it's happened.
Yes, it's all in one.
Great.
Thank you.
We've moved and passed the amended
Yes.
motion. Yeah.
Thank you all. Well done. We are moving into council workshop time. So if our guests could please depart, and thank you again for coming.